A young Google employee vanished during her afternoon jog in a quiet Massachusetts town, leaving her mother heartbroken and desperate for answers. But 8 months later, a state trooper spots something that makes him quickly scribble a license plate number on his hand, a discovery that would expose the horrifying truth about what happened to her. In the bustling world of New York City, 27-year-old Vanessa Marcotte had built a life that many would envy. As a healthcare account manager at Google, she navigated the complex intersection of technology and medicine, helping to shape the future of digital health solutions. Her colleagues knew her as driven, intelligent, and remarkably compassionate, qualities that made her excel in her role connecting healthcare providers with cutting-edge Google technologies. Vanessa had not always been a New Yorker. Born and raised in Leominster, Massachusetts, she carried the grounded values of small-town New England with her wherever she went. Her educational journey took her through the prestigious Bancroft School in Worcester, where she developed the analytical skills that would serve her well in her future career. From there, she earned her degree from Boston University in 2011, graduating with honors and a clear vision for her future. The transition from Boston to New York City in January 2015 marked a significant chapter in Vanessa's life. Landing the position at Google represented more than just a career move. It was the fulfillment of her ambition to make a meaningful impact in the world of technology and healthcare. She threw herself into her work with characteristic enthusiasm, quickly earning the respect of her colleagues and supervisors. But despite her success in the fast-paced world of Manhattan, Vanessa never forgot her roots. She remained incredibly close to her mother, Vanessa Marcotte, who still lived in the quiet town of Princeton, Massachusetts. The bond between mother and daughter was extraordinary, built on years of shared experiences, mutual support, and genuine friendship that transcended the typical parent-child relationship. Vanessa made it a priority to visit her mother regularly, often driving the several hours from New York to Massachusetts on weekends. These visits were precious to both women, opportunities to reconnect, share meals, and enjoy the peaceful atmosphere of small-town life that stood in stark contrast to the relentless energy of New York City. Fitness played an important role in Vanessa's life. In a demanding job that required long hours and intense focus, she found running to be her sanctuary. The rhythmic pounding of her feet on pavement, the steady breathing, the meditative quality of a good run. These elements combined to create her favorite form of stress relief and physical exercise. Whether jogging through Central Park in Manhattan or along the quiet roads of Massachusetts during her visits home, running was her constant companion. Her mother often marveled at Vanessa's dedication to fitness. Even during weekend visits, when most people might prefer to relax and unwind, Vanessa would lace up her running shoes and head out for her regular workout. It was a testament to her discipline and her understanding of the importance of maintaining physical and mental health in a high-stress career. Those who knew Vanessa well understood that her success was not accidental. She possessed a remarkable combination of intelligence, work ethic, and genuine care for others that made her effective in her professional role and beloved by her family and friends. Her colleagues at Google respected her ability to bridge the gap between complex technical concepts and practical healthcare applications. The young woman who had grown up in the quiet neighborhoods of Leominster had successfully navigated the competitive world of technology while maintaining her core values and close family relationships. She represented the best of both worlds, ambitious enough to thrive in New York City, yet grounded enough to never forget the importance of family and personal well-being. Sunday, August 7, 2016. Began like countless other weekends for Vanessa Marcotte. She had made the familiar drive from New York City to Princeton, Massachusetts, the previous day to spend time with her mother. The summer weather was perfect, warm but not oppressive, with the kind of clear skies that made outdoor activities irresistible. Princeton, Massachusetts, was the kind of town that embodied New England charm. With a population of just over 3,000 people, it was a place where neighbors knew each other, where crime was rare, and where the biggest concerns typically revolved around local school board meetings or the annual town fair. The rolling hills, tree-lined streets, and well-maintained homes created an atmosphere of safety and tranquility that stood in sharp contrast to the urban environment where Vanessa spent her working days. Vanessa Marcotte treasured these weekend visits from her daughter. Their relationship had evolved over the years from the typical mother-daughter dynamic to something more akin to a close friendship. They could talk for hours about everything from Vanessa's latest projects at Google to local news from Princeton. These conversations were precious to both women, representing a connection that distance and busy schedules could never diminish. On this particular Sunday afternoon, Vanessa was feeling restless. She had enjoyed a leisurely morning with her mother, catching up on family news and discussing her work in New York. But by early afternoon, the familiar urge to exercise was calling to her. Despite being on a relaxing weekend visit, Vanessa maintained her commitment to fitness, and the beautiful weather made the prospect of a run particularly appealing. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Vanessa made the decision that would change everything. She announced to her mother that she was going to go for a run. For Rossana, this was nothing unusual. She had seen her daughter prepare for countless runs during previous visits. Vanessa was methodical in her preparation, changing into her running attire and taking a few minutes to plan her route. The conversation between mother and daughter that afternoon was typical of their relationship, warm, supportive, and filled with the easy affection that characterized their bond. Rossana watched as her daughter prepared for her run, admiring her dedication to fitness and her positive attitude. There was nothing to suggest that this run would be any different from the hundreds of others Vanessa had completed over the years. As Vanessa prepared to leave, she shared her planned route with her mother. She intended to run along the quiet roads that wound through Princeton's residential areas, possibly extending her route to include some of the more scenic parts of town. The familiarity of these roads gave both women comfort. Vanessa had run these routes many times during previous visits, and they were generally considered safe and well-traveled enough to provide security without being busy enough to pose traffic concerns. The last image Vanessa Marcotte would have of her daughter alive was of Vanessa heading out the door for her run, her face bright with the smile that had always been her most distinctive feature. One thing I remember very clearly is the smile on her face as she left to go for her walk. Rossana would later tell the court during the trial, "That is the last time I would see her lovely smile. When she smiled, I smiled. My heart was full." The afternoon stretched on quietly in the Marcotte household. Rossana went about her usual Sunday activities, perhaps reading, preparing dinner, or simply enjoying the peaceful atmosphere of her home. The hours passed without concern. Vanessa's runs often lasted an hour or more, depending on her route and how she was feeling. There was no reason for alarm as the afternoon progressed. But as evening approached and Vanessa had not returned, a different feeling began to settle over the house. This was not typical behavior for her daughter. Vanessa was responsible and considerate, always mindful of letting her mother know her plans and staying in communication. The silence was becoming increasingly troubling. As the sun began to set on August 7th, 2016, Vanessa Marcotte faced the terrible realization that something was wrong. Her daughter, who had left the house with such a bright smile just hours earlier, had not returned from what should have been a routine run through the safe, familiar streets of Princeton. As evening shadows lengthened across Princeton, Massachusetts, Vanessa Marcotte's initial concern was rapidly transforming into genuine alarm. By 7 o'clock in the evening, Vanessa had been gone for approximately 6 hours, far longer than any of her previous runs. The knot of worry in Rossana's stomach was growing tighter with each passing minute. Rossana began by calling Vanessa's cell phone repeatedly, but each call went directly to voicemail. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. She tried texting, hoping that perhaps Vanessa had simply lost track of time or decided to extend her run further than planned. But the messages remained unread, and there was no response. The next step was to reach out to other family members and friends who might have heard from Vanessa. Rossana called relatives in the area, asking if anyone had seen her daughter or received any communication from her. The responses were uniformly negative. No one had seen or heard from Vanessa since she left for her run that afternoon. By 8 o'clock in the evening, with darkness beginning to fall, Rossana made the decision that every parent dreads. She called the Princeton Police Department to report her daughter missing. The dispatcher who took the call was professional and thorough, gathering all the relevant information about Vanessa's disappearance, her planned route, and the circumstances surrounding her departure. The Princeton Police Department, while small, was well equipped to handle missing person cases. However, the officers who responded to Rossana's call understood immediately that this situation was different from the typical missing person report. Vanessa was not a teenager acting out or an elderly person who might have become confused. She was a responsible adult with strong family ties and no history of disappearing without explanation. Within an hour of Rossana's call, police officers were at the Marcotte home, conducting a detailed interview with Vanessa's mother and beginning to piece together the timeline of events. They gathered information about Vanessa's usual running routes, her habits, and any recent changes in her behavior or circumstances that might be relevant to her disappearance. The officers also began the process of organizing a search effort. They contacted additional personnel and began reaching out to local agencies that could assist with the search. The Massachusetts State Police were notified, given their resources and expertise in handling serious missing person cases that might cross jurisdictional lines. As word of Vanessa's disappearance spread through the small community of Princeton, neighbors and friends began to mobilize. The tight-knit nature of the town meant that news traveled quickly, and people were genuinely concerned about the safety of this young woman who had grown up in the area and was well regarded by those who knew her. Local residents began organizing their own informal search efforts, checking their properties, outbuildings, and any areas where someone might have sought shelter or become injured. The wooded areas surrounding Princeton's residential neighborhoods were of particular concern, as they provided numerous places where someone could become lost or hurt. The Princeton Fire Department joined the search effort, bringing additional personnel and equipment to help cover the expanding search area. Their knowledge of local terrain and experience with search and rescue operations proved invaluable as the effort intensified throughout the evening. As the search continued into the night, the reality of the situation became increasingly clear to everyone involved. This was not a case of someone simply losing track of time or taking an unexpectedly long route. Vanessa Marcotte, a responsible adult with strong family connections and no history of erratic behavior, had vanished without a trace during what should have been a routine run through her hometown. The search team spread out across Princeton, using flashlights and calling Vanessa's name as they methodically checked roads, wooded areas, and any location where she might have encountered trouble. The efforts were hampered by darkness, but the determination of the searchers, both professional and volunteer, remained strong. By midnight, the search had expanded to include neighboring towns and jurisdictions. The Massachusetts State Police had committed additional resources to the effort, understanding that time was critical in missing person cases. The longer Vanessa remained missing, the more likely it was that she had encountered serious trouble. At 8:20 in the evening on August 7, 2016, the worst fears of everyone searching for Vanessa Marcotte were realized. A search team working through the wooded areas near her mother's home made a discovery that would forever change the peaceful character of Princeton, Massachusetts. Approximately half a mile from the Marcotte family home, hidden in a secluded wooded area away from the main roads, searchers found Vanessa's body. The location was far enough from residential areas to be isolated, yet close enough to suggest that her attacker had intimate knowledge of the local terrain and the patterns of the community. The scene that confronted the searchers was one of unimaginable horror. Vanessa's body showed clear signs of a violent struggle, providing immediate evidence that she had not simply suffered an accident or medical emergency during her run. The condition of her remains told a story of brutal violence that shocked even experienced law enforcement officers. Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. arrived at the scene to personally oversee the investigation. His presence underscored the seriousness of the crime and the commitment of law enforcement to finding those responsible. Early was known for his thorough approach to major cases and his determination to seek justice for victims and their families. The initial examination of the scene revealed several crucial pieces of evidence. Most significantly, Vanessa's body showed signs of burn damage, suggesting that her attacker had attempted to destroy evidence by setting her remains on fire. This detail indicated a level of premeditation and awareness of forensic techniques that suggested the perpetrator had either criminal experience or had given considerable thought to covering their tracks. Medical examiner investigators who arrived at the scene began the careful process of documenting and collecting evidence. Their preliminary examination revealed that Vanessa had suffered multiple forms of trauma. She had been strangled, which appeared to be the primary cause of death. Additionally, she had sustained blunt force trauma to her head and torso, indicating a prolonged and violent assault. Perhaps most significantly, the examination revealed that Vanessa had a broken nose and what appeared to be defensive wounds on her hands and arms. These injuries told a story of incredible courage and determination. Vanessa had not been taken by surprise. She had fought back against her attacker with everything she had. The forensic team's careful examination of Vanessa's fingernails revealed what would prove to be the most crucial evidence in the entire case. Trapped beneath her fingernails was DNA material that clearly did not belong to her. This biological evidence provided concrete proof that she had made physical contact with her attacker, scratching and clawing at him as she fought for her life. Detective investigators at the scene understood immediately that this DNA evidence represented their best hope for identifying and apprehending Vanessa's killer. The fact that she had managed to obtain genetic material from her attacker during the struggle was a testament to her fighting spirit and would ultimately prove to be the key to solving her murder. The crime scene investigation continued throughout the night and into the following day. Every piece of potential evidence was carefully catalogued and preserved. The area was thoroughly searched for any additional clues that might help identify the perpetrator or provide insight into the sequence of events that led to Vanessa's death. The location of the crime scene also provided important clues about the nature of the attack. The secluded wooded area was not visible from any of the main roads in Princeton, suggesting that the perpetrator had either chosen this location deliberately or had forced Vanessa to this spot during the assault. The remoteness of the location also suggested that the attacker was familiar with the local area and knew where to go to avoid detection. As news of the discovery spread through Princeton and the surrounding communities, the shock and grief were overwhelming. This was not the kind of crime that residents of this quiet town expected to confront. The brutal nature of the assault and the fact that it had happened to such a well-regarded young woman made the tragedy even more difficult to comprehend. For Vanessa Marcotte, the confirmation of her worst fears was devastating. The daughter who had left her home with such a bright smile just hours earlier was now gone forever, the victim of an unthinkably violent crime. The last conversation they had shared, the final image of Vanessa preparing for her run, would now be forever tinged with the knowledge of what followed. In the immediate aftermath of discovering Vanessa Marcotte's body, law enforcement agencies across Massachusetts mobilized for what would become one of the most intensive investigations in the region's recent history. The Massachusetts State Police took the lead role in coordinating the effort, working closely with the Worcester County District Attorney's Office and local police departments. District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. understood from the beginning that this case would require significant resources and expertise. The brutal nature of the crime, combined with its apparent randomness, created the potential for public panic if the perpetrator was not quickly identified and apprehended. Early committed his office's full resources to the investigation, assigning experienced prosecutors to work alongside the investigative team. The first priority was the comprehensive analysis of the crime scene and the evidence collected there. The DNA material found beneath Vanessa's fingernails was immediately sent to the state crime laboratory for analysis. This genetic evidence represented the most promising lead in the case, but the analysis would take time, and investigators could not afford to wait passively for results. Detective teams began the painstaking process of interviewing everyone who might have relevant information about Vanessa's disappearance and murder. This included not only her family members and friends, but also residents of Princeton who might have seen suspicious activity on the day of the crime. The investigators cast a wide net, recognizing that seemingly insignificant details might prove crucial to solving the case. The investigation quickly revealed that Vanessa had put up an extraordinary fight against her attacker. The evidence of her struggle was extensive and telling. Her broken nose, defensive wounds, and the DNA evidence under her fingernails all painted a picture of someone who had refused to give up, even when facing overwhelming odds. During a press conference held just days after the discovery of Vanessa's body, District Attorney Early made a point of emphasizing this aspect of the case. He told reporters that investigators were certain Vanessa's attacker was a man, and that he had likely walked away from the crime scene bearing visible injuries from the struggle. The investigators believed that Vanessa's fierce resistance had left her killer bruised, scratched, and possibly requiring medical attention. This information proved to be strategically important in the investigation. Law enforcement agencies throughout Massachusetts were alerted to watch for men seeking treatment for unexplained injuries, particularly scratches or bruises that might be consistent with a violent struggle. Hospital emergency rooms, walk-in clinics, and private medical practices were all contacted and asked to report any suspicious cases. The public response to the investigation was immediate and overwhelming. The Massachusetts State Police established a dedicated tip line for information related to Vanessa's murder, and the calls began pouring in almost immediately. Within the first week of the investigation, hundreds of tips had been received, each one requiring careful evaluation and follow-up. The volume of tips eventually grew to over 1,300 separate pieces of information from the public. While the vast majority of these tips ultimately proved to be unrelated to the crime, each one had to be investigated thoroughly. The process was time-consuming and labor-intensive, but investigators understood that among all the false leads and irrelevant information, there might be the one crucial piece of evidence that would solve the case. Community members throughout Princeton and the surrounding areas were genuinely frightened by the randomness and violence of the crime. The fact that a young woman could be attacked and killed while jogging in broad daylight in what was considered a safe community sent shockwaves through the entire region. Parents restricted their children's activities, and many people altered their exercise routines to avoid running alone or in isolated areas. The investigation also expanded to include potential connections to other crimes in the region. The brutal nature of Vanessa's murder suggested that this might not have been the perpetrator's first violent crime. investigators began looking at unsolved cases throughout New England, searching for any patterns or similarities that might indicate a serial offender. Particularly troubling was the similarity between Vanessa's murder and the killing of Karina Vetrano, a 30-year-old woman who had been murdered while jogging in Queens, New York, just 1 week before Vanessa's death. Both women had been attacked while running alone in secluded areas, both had been sexually assaulted, and both had been strangled. While investigators could not establish a definitive connection between the two cases, the similarities were too striking to ignore. The forensic analysis of the DNA evidence was proceeding carefully but slowly. The genetic material found under Vanessa's fingernails was of good quality, providing investigators with a complete DNA profile of her attacker. However, when this profile was run through the national DNA database systems, no matches were found. This meant that Vanessa's killer had never been arrested and convicted of a crime that required DNA sampling, or that he had somehow avoided detection in previous criminal activities. For 8 long months, the investigation into Vanessa Marcotte's murder continued with relentless determination, but frustrating lack of progress. The DNA evidence provided investigators with a clear genetic profile of the killer, but without a match in the criminal database system, the case remained unsolved. The 1,300 tips that had poured in from the public had been thoroughly investigated, but none had produced the breakthrough that investigators desperately needed. The breakthrough, when it finally came, would result from the kind of police work that demonstrates how training, experience, and attention to detail can make the difference between a solved case and a cold case file. It was the kind of moment that reinforces the importance of thorough investigation and the value of skilled observant law enforcement officers. In April 2017, Massachusetts State Police trooper was conducting routine patrol duties in the Princeton area when he observed a vehicle that caught his attention. The dark-colored SUV matched the general description of a vehicle that had been reported in the area around the time of Vanessa's murder. While such sightings had been reported numerous times over the previous months, this particular officer had a feeling that this vehicle warranted closer attention. The trooper followed proper protocol and attempted to get a better look at the vehicle and its occupant. What he saw made him believe that this might be significant to the ongoing investigation. The driver appeared to match the general description of the suspect that investigators had developed based on witness statements and evidence from the crime scene. Acting on his instincts and training, the trooper quickly committed the vehicle's license plate number to memory. In a moment that would prove crucial to solving the case, he immediately wrote the plate number on his hand to ensure that he would not forget it. This simple act of thorough police work would ultimately lead to the identification and arrest of Vanessa's killer. The license plate information was quickly run through motor vehicle databases, leading investigators to identify the vehicle's owner, Angelo Ortiz, a 31-year-old delivery driver who lived in the area. The information about Ortiz was immediately forwarded to the investigative team working on Vanessa's case. Background checks on Ortiz revealed that he had some previous contact with law enforcement, but nothing that had resulted in DNA sampling for the criminal database. He worked as a delivery driver, which meant he was familiar with the roads and neighborhoods throughout the region, including Princeton. His job also meant that he had legitimate reasons to be in various locations at different times, which could potentially explain his presence in the area on the day of Vanessa's murder. The investigative team moved quickly to obtain a warrant for Ortiz's arrest based on the trooper's observation and the ongoing investigation. However, they wanted to be absolutely certain before making an arrest in such a high-profile case. The decision was made to obtain a DNA sample from Ortiz for comparison with the genetic evidence found under Vanessa's fingernails. The DNA collection was conducted through proper legal channels, with investigators obtaining the necessary warrants to ensure that any evidence collected would be admissible in court. The sample was immediately sent to the State Crime Laboratory for analysis in comparison with the DNA profile obtained from the crime scene. The laboratory analysis took several tense days, during which investigators prepared for the possibility that they might finally have identified Vanessa's killer. The DNA comparison process is meticulous and requires multiple confirmations to ensure accuracy, but the results when they came back were definitive. The DNA sample from Angelo Ortiz was a perfect match for the genetic material found under Vanessa Marcotte's fingernails. After 8 months of investigation, the breakthrough had finally come. The man who had brutally murdered Vanessa during her afternoon run had been identified through a combination of thorough police work, forensic science, and the courage of a young woman who had refused to go down without a fight. The arrest of Angelo Ortiz was carried out quickly and efficiently. On April 21, 2017, he was taken into custody without incident. The charges against him were severe, murder in the first degree, aggravated rape, and kidnapping. The evidence against him was overwhelming, built around the DNA match that directly linked him to the crime. For Vanessa Marcotte and the rest of Vanessa's family, the arrest represented a crucial step toward justice for their loved one. While it could never bring Vanessa back or heal the wounds left by her loss, it provided some measure of comfort to know that the person responsible for her death would face the consequences of his actions. Angelo Colon Ortiz, the man whose DNA matched the evidence found under Vanessa Marcotte's fingernails, was a 31-year-old delivery driver who had lived in the area for several years. As investigators delved deeper into his background, a picture emerged of someone who had managed to hide his violent tendencies while maintaining what appeared to be a normal life on the surface. Colon Ortiz worked for a delivery service, which meant he spent much of his time driving throughout central Massachusetts, including the Princeton area where Vanessa was murdered. His job required him to be familiar with the local roads and neighborhoods, giving him the kind of intimate knowledge of the area that would have been essential for the crime he committed. The nature of his work also provided him with a plausible explanation for being in various locations at different times. For someone planning to commit a crime, having a legitimate reason to be in an area would be valuable for avoiding suspicion. His delivery route took him through Princeton regularly, making him familiar with the quiet roads and secluded areas that characterized the town. When investigators examined Colon Ortiz's background more closely, they discovered that he had some previous contact with law enforcement, but nothing that had resulted in a felony conviction requiring DNA sampling. This explained why his genetic profile was not in the criminal database system when the DNA evidence from Vanessa's murder was first analyzed. The investigation into Colon Ortiz's activities on August 7, 2016, revealed that he had been in the Princeton area on the day of Vanessa's murder. His work schedule and delivery records placed him in the vicinity around the time that she went for her run. This information, combined with the DNA evidence, created a strong case linking him to the crime. Perhaps most disturbing was the apparent randomness of the attack. There was no evidence that Colon Ortiz had any previous connection to Vanessa or her family. He had not been a customer of Google, had not attended Boston University, and had no apparent reason to target her specifically. This suggested that Vanessa had been the victim of a random attack by someone who saw an opportunity and acted on his violent impulses. The randomness of the crime made it even more terrifying for the community. The idea that someone could be going about their daily business, working a regular job, and driving through neighborhoods while harboring such violent intentions was deeply unsettling. It reinforced the reality that danger could come from the most unexpected sources. When confronted with the DNA evidence, Colon Ortiz initially denied any involvement in Vanessa's murder. He claimed to have no knowledge of the crime and suggested that there must be some mistake with the laboratory analysis. However, the strength of the DNA evidence made his denials increasingly untenable. The DNA match was not ambiguous or partial. It was a complete match that established with virtual certainty that genetic material from Colon Ortiz was present under Vanessa's fingernails. The odds of this being a coincidence or laboratory error were astronomical. The science was clear, and the evidence was overwhelming. As the case proceeded through the legal system, additional evidence emerged that strengthened the prosecution's case. Investigators found that Colon Ortiz had made statements to associates that were inconsistent with his claimed innocence. His behavior in the days following Vanessa's murder had also raised suspicions among people who knew him. The investigation also revealed that Colon Ortiz had been interested in following news coverage of the case, which is not uncommon among perpetrators of high-profile crimes. His apparent fascination with the investigation and his attempts to learn about the progress of the case were noted by investigators as additional indicators of his involvement. The legal proceedings moved slowly but steadily toward resolution. Colon Ortiz was held without bail, given the severity of the charges and the strength of the evidence against him. His legal team faced the challenging task of defending a client whose DNA had been found at a murder scene in circumstances that strongly suggested his guilt. As the case developed, the impact on the community began to shift from fear and uncertainty to a sense of relief that the perpetrator had been identified and arrested. However, the randomness of the crime and the fact that it had been committed by someone who appeared to be living a normal life continued to resonate with residents of Princeton and the surrounding areas. The legal proceedings against Angelo Colon Ortiz extended over several years, during which time the case remained a priority for the Worcester County District Attorney's Office. The strength of the DNA evidence provided prosecutors with a solid foundation for their case, but they were committed to ensuring that every aspect of the investigation was thorough and that justice would be served for Vanessa and her family. Throughout the legal process, the Marcotte family demonstrated remarkable strength and dignity. They attended court proceedings, provided victim impact statements, and worked with prosecutors to ensure that Vanessa's memory was honored throughout the proceedings. Their composure in the face of such tragedy was inspiring to everyone involved in the case. The trial preparation revealed the full extent of the evidence against Cullen Ortiz. In addition to the DNA match that directly linked him to the crime, investigators had developed a comprehensive timeline of his activities on the day of the murder. His delivery route, his presence in the Princeton area, and his behavior in the days following the crime all supported the prosecution's case. The forensic evidence also told the complete story of Vanessa's final moments. The autopsy results, the crime scene analysis, and the DNA evidence all combined to paint a picture of a young woman who had fought valiantly against her attacker. The evidence of her struggle, her broken nose, defensive wounds, and the genetic material she had obtained from her killer demonstrated her courage and determination even in the face of overwhelming odds. As the case moved toward trial, Cullen Ortiz's legal team faced the reality that the evidence against their client was overwhelming. The DNA match was scientifically sound and legally unassailable. The additional evidence developed by investigators created a comprehensive case that would be difficult to challenge in court. In October 2022, 6 years after Vanessa's murder, Angelo Cullen Ortiz made the decision to accept responsibility for his actions. In a court proceeding that brought closure to a case that had haunted the community for years, he entered a guilty plea to charges of second-degree murder and unarmed robbery. The plea agreement was reached in consultation with the Marcotte family, who had expressed their desire to avoid a lengthy trial that would require them to relive the horrific details of Vanessa's murder. The family's primary concern was ensuring that Cullen Ortiz would be held accountable for his actions, and that he would never be able to harm anyone else. Under the terms of the plea agreement, Cullen Ortiz was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 45 years. This sentence ensured that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars, paying for the crime he had committed against Vanessa and her family. During the sentencing hearing, Vanessa Marcotte delivered a powerful victim impact statement that captured both her grief and her determination to honor her daughter's memory. She spoke about the last time she saw Vanessa alive, describing the smile on her daughter's face as she left for her run. "One thing I remember very clearly is the smile on her face as she left to go for her walk," she told the court. "That is the last time I would see her lovely smile. When she smiled, I smiled. My heart was full." The Marcotte family's statement to the court following the sentencing reflected their complicated feelings about the resolution of the case. "We are thankful and gratified the legal process has accomplished what we always wished for, that this man will now be in a place where he cannot hurt anyone else like the way he hurt Vanessa," they said. While the legal proceedings could never bring Vanessa back, the family found some measure of peace in knowing that justice had been served. District Attorney Joseph Early also addressed the resolution of the case, acknowledging the hard work of all the investigators and prosecutors who had worked tirelessly to solve Vanessa's murder. The completion of this case is the result of the tireless and committed work of the Massachusetts State Police, Princeton Police, and assistant district attorneys who were involved in the investigation and prosecution of Vanessa's killer, he said. "We know nothing cannot bring Vanessa back, but we know through the meticulous work of the prosecutors and investigators involved, justice will be served." The sentencing of Angelo Cullen Ortiz brought closure to one of the most challenging cases in recent Massachusetts history. The combination of thorough police work, advanced forensic science, and the courage of a young woman who refused to give up had ultimately led to justice being served. While the legal resolution of Vanessa Marcotte's case brought justice for her murder, her family was determined to ensure that her death would have meaning beyond the courtroom. In 2017, they established the Vanessa T. Marcotte Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to honoring Vanessa's memory through education and violence prevention programs. The foundation's primary mission focuses on providing self-defense training and education to women throughout Massachusetts and beyond. The programs are designed to give women the tools and confidence they need to protect themselves in dangerous situations. The foundation's work is particularly meaningful given that Vanessa's own fighting spirit had ultimately led to her killer's identification and conviction. Since its establishment, the Vanessa T. Marcotte Foundation has trained thousands of women in self-defense techniques. The workshops are offered free of charge and are designed to be accessible to women of all ages and fitness levels. The training covers both physical self-defense techniques and situational awareness skills that can help women recognize and avoid potentially dangerous situations. The foundation also provides educational programs on healthy relationships and violence prevention. These programs are designed to help people recognize the warning signs of potentially abusive relationships and to understand the resources available to those who find themselves in dangerous situations. The impact of the foundation's work extends far beyond the specific skills taught in the workshops. By providing women with self-defense training and education, the foundation helps to build confidence and empower women to take control of their personal safety. This empowerment is perhaps the most fitting tribute to Vanessa's memory, as it reflects her own courage and determination in the face of danger. The foundation's work also serves as a reminder of the importance of fighting back when confronted with violence. Vanessa's resistance to her attacker had been crucial to solving her murder, and the foundation's self-defense training emphasizes the importance of not giving up, even in the most desperate circumstances. The case of Vanessa Marcotte also had a broader impact on law enforcement practices and community safety awareness. The investigation demonstrated the importance of thorough police work and the value of community cooperation in solving crimes. The 1,300 tips received by investigators, while mostly unrelated to the case, showed the level of community engagement and concern that can be mobilized when a serious crime occurs. The DNA evidence that solved the case also highlighted the importance of forensic science in modern criminal investigations. The genetic material that Vanessa obtained from her attacker during their struggle was the key piece of evidence that led to Colin Ortiz's identification and conviction. This aspect of the case reinforced the importance of preserving and properly analyzing forensic evidence. The random nature of the attack also served as a sobering reminder that violence can come from unexpected sources. The fact that Colin Ortiz appeared to be living a normal life while harboring violent tendencies was a disturbing revelation that resonated with communities throughout the region. For the Princeton community, the resolution of the case brought a sense of closure, but also lasting change. The murder of Vanessa Marcotte had shattered the sense of security that residents had taken for granted, and while the arrest and conviction of her killer provided some comfort, the community would never be quite the same. The case also demonstrated the importance of personal safety awareness and the value of taking precautions when exercising alone or in isolated areas. While such precautions cannot guarantee safety, they can reduce the risk of becoming a victim of violent crime. Ultimately, the legacy of Vanessa Marcotte is one of courage, determination, and the power of fighting back against violence. Her refusal to surrender, even in the face of overwhelming odds, not only led to the solution of her own murder, but also inspired the creation of programs that continue to help protect other women from violence. The case of Vanessa Marcotte represents one of the most compelling examples of how courage and determination can triumph even in the darkest circumstances. Her refusal to give up during the most terrifying moments of her life ultimately led to justice being served and continues to inspire efforts to protect others from similar violence. This incredible case demonstrates that sometimes the most important evidence in solving a crime comes from the victim's own fight for survival. Vanessa's courage in fighting back against her attacker, even when facing impossible odds, provided investigators with the crucial DNA evidence that would eventually lead to her killer's identification and conviction. The Vanessa T. Marcotte Foundation continues to honor her memory by providing self-defense training and education to women throughout Massachusetts and beyond. The Foundation's work serves as a powerful reminder that we all have the ability to fight back against violence, and that sometimes that resistance can make the difference between life and death, or between a solved case and a cold case file. If you found this case as compelling as we did, make sure to subscribe to Criminal Mind Cortex for more incredible true crime investigations that showcase the power of courage, determination, and outstanding police work. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest examinations of cases where ordinary people displayed extraordinary bravery in the face of unimaginable circumstances. We explore cases from around the world that demonstrate how the human spirit can triumph over evil, how thorough investigation can bring justice to victims and their families, and how the courage of individuals can inspire changes that protect entire communities. Join our community of subscribers who appreciate true crime content that goes beyond sensational headlines to examine the real human stories behind these cases. The case of Vanessa Marcotte reminds us that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to fight back, and that sometimes that fight can make all the difference. Her legacy lives on through the foundation established in her name, and through the thousands of women who have learned self-defense skills that could one day save their lives. Subscribe now to Criminal Mind Cortex and become part of a community that honors the memory of victims like Vanessa Marcotte by learning from their courage and continuing their fight against violence. Together we can ensure that their stories are never forgotten and that their legacy continues to inspire and protect others.